So we're actually going to open with a song that Sandra and I wrote, or part of the song. We'll just do a little truncated version of it.
I cut down on the dairy and the beef, 'cause of methane, and yet we're proud of our AREDAY. On the spaceship Earth, we learned from Bucky, but all the news is like Koch brothers, Donald Trump tripping in the boardroom, cellophane, cell phones, trashing up the landfills. We don't care. We're driving Teslas in our dreams, and everybody's like fracking, drilling, offshore oil rigs, jet planes, poachers, lions on a gold leash. We don't care. We aren't caught up in your love affair, 'cause we don't need no oil. It's a run in our blood. That kind of muck just ain't for us. We're getting on a different bus. Let me get that solar, bring back the honeybees, and maybe we'll rule. Since we live sustainably, my friends and I, we've cracked the code. Reframing scarcity to abundance, and everyone who knows us knows that we think in systems to create win-wins. Now everybody's like, draw down carbon, regenerate soil, accelerate markets, empowering community. We do care. Revolutions in the air, and everybody's like, maker culture, writing new narratives, riding bikes to a beautiful future. We do care. Revolutions in the air, 'cause we don't need no oil. It's a run in our blood. That kind of muck just ain't for us. We're getting on a different bus. Let me get that solar, and bring back the honeybees, and maybe we'll rule. Since we live sustainably, live sustainably. So we are actually a group of 5 females called the Sea Stars, an all-women's a cappella singing group singing about the future, which we thought would be a nice way to kick off this panel, Accelerating the Future. And for the story arc of the panel, we'd like to start with Amanda, who is Executive Director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and root into the history of this visionary Buckminster Fuller, who was so ahead of his time with all these amazing ideas for making society work for 100% of humanity. And from there, we'll introduce Ryan Kushner, who's working with the Elemental Accelerator, who's taking these cutting-edge startups and slingshotting them into the future to help transform utilities and the power sector. My company, 10 Power, is working with communities across the world that don't have access to electricity. So taking a lot of these innovative approaches that are being born in Hawaii and Silicon Valley, across the world, and bringing them to the communities where they're going to make the most maximum impact on people's lives directly. And then we'll catapult directly into a transformative and artistic future with Paul Miller, AKA DJ Spooky, who is an author, a visionary, and who's working with a lot of collaborative creatives to really spread the message in terms of what we're trying to achieve. Take it away, Amanda.
All right, thank you. So I'm the Executive Director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and our mission, like Buckminster Fuller's mission, is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. And the way we're going to do this is by building a network of design scientists. And so a design scientist is an entrepreneur, a thinker, a doer, someone who's out there who's using kind of the most cutting-edge innovation in technology, but is inspired by nature's design, and really, most importantly, the principles behind nature's design. So there's a lot to dig in there. Bucky came up with this whole own math called synergetics, which some people think might be the missing link between quantum physics and general relativity. There's a lot there to discover. We're really excited about teaching people everything that Bucky had to offer along the way, everything from that, you know, the tetrahedron all the way to 100% of humanity. So 50 years ago, in October of 1967, Bucky gave a speech called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And we are celebrating that as the Institute this October by hosting a global hackathon. And we're asking the question, how big can we think? And we're inviting people from all over the world to create media, to create toys, to create games and tools, and all sorts of different ways and provocations for all of us to ask, how big can we think? So the kind of main thesis of Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth was that over-specialization leads to extinction. We're all way too caught in our silos, we're not thinking in systems, and it's going to lead to humans being extinct. But he said if we can think bigger, then we'll be able to solve and really dissolve problems more easily. So we're doing that in October, and I would love to collaborate with anyone in the room here who wants to host an event wherever they are or has an idea to bring to the table. We'll be doing a 2-day hackathon and then a 4-month design sprint afterwards to ensure that those projects really get going. Another project that we're doing is inspired by a book that he wrote called Education Automation. So he saw automation and AI and what he called the two-way television, the internet coming down the pike, and he saw that eventually there would be less jobs and that education would become the largest global industry and that we would have a universal basic income. He talked about it more as a scholarship program, but that humans would left to do what humans are best to do, which is learn. And so we would have this universal basic income, and we would all just learn. So instead of asking each other, what do you do, we would ask each other, what do you learn? And so we're building off of that and building off of this idea of how big can we think. And we're building a 8 billion person media campaign and platform that will help shift the paradigm from me to we, as we talked about yesterday. And this will be kind of World Game 4.0 for those of you that know World Game and Bucky's work around that. So it'll be not only education, but also strategy tools for how do we plan a future that works for 100% of humanity. And we'll be using the best in new technology, from AI to satellite data, some really fun AR and VR stuff that we're playing around with, plus some cool gamification work and creating these education and design tools. So we're doing fundraising for that right now. If anyone has contacts of people who would want to fund such a audacious, bold plan, we would love to meet them. And then the third thing I'll talk about is Bucky talks about the global design science decade that was supposed to be from 65 to 75. He said that we could reform all of humanity in that time and make the world work for everyone. He was definitely ahead of his time, but he basically created a blueprint for the revolution. And so we're kind of recoding that to be relevant to today and creating some really fun tools around that. And we're starting an endowment program for the Institute. We're going to raise $100 million and work off of the 60 or 70 finalists that we've worked with our challenge in the last 10 years, who are all regenerative whole systems design projects, like some of the people here in the room, the Bonobo Project, and Saver Institute in the back too. So building off of that amazing cohort of people, we're building a regenerative development fund for the entire world that will also support BFI. So if anyone's interested or has contacts in the finance area who wants to get really involved in the regenerative side of things, I'd love to talk to you. And with that, I will hand it over to Sandra. Oh yeah. With that, we'll play a short video so you guys can hear a little bit of Fuller's voice and get a better impression.
People say to me, I wonder what it'd be like to be on a spaceship. And I say to you, you don't really realize what you're doing. Because everybody is an astronaut. You all live aboard a beautiful little spaceship called Earth.
I think that we're some kind of final examination as to whether human beings are qualified to take on the responsibility we're designed to be entrusted with. And this is not a matter of examination of the types of governments, nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with the economic system. It's to do with the individual. Does the individual have the courage to really go along with the truth?
I'm not trying to imitate nature, I'm trying to find the principles she's using. You're going to have to find out what needs to be done. How do you organize yourself to accommodate going from 1% of humanity to 99% of humanity who are now going to have to live? And that is the design responsibility. Therefore, the only way we can possibly take care of everybody is through a design revolution, doing more with less. It's highly feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living without having anybody profit at the expense of another, so everybody can enjoy the whole earth.
Ryan, tell us how we accelerate these ideas.
Sure. So that's our business. So I work with an amazing organization called Elemental Accelerator, and we focus on taking really transformative, ripe, clean tech ideas and turning them into scalable businesses. Our program is based in Honolulu and Palo Alto. I'll show a video in a second that says it much better than I will. But sort of in meeting this global challenge of getting to 100% clean energy, first of all, Hawaii is the first and only state to make that proclamation, although California is considering it right now. We're going to need a lot of innovation. There's going to be a lot of businesses made and money made. And so we're in the process of taking the ideas and scaling them. So I think we can just show the video. It's probably the best way to sort of summarize what we do and show some of our portfolio companies.
Terviva develops a new crop. This tree produces seeds from which we extract oil to produce biodiesel. I work for Pono Home. We help people lower their utility bills. We've been focusing on low-income and elderly families.
We've had someone come into our home and we have devices installed that helps us to monitor the use of electricity.
Cutting 25% off those bills, people were really appreciative. It was awesome to hear that and feel like we were making a difference. Start small and then people start to catch on and then you get a lot of adopters.
Hawaii is 10 years into a 40-year energy transition. In 2045, our lives will be powered by 100% clean energy.
So I'll just mention a couple things sort of on top of that and sort of a couple call-outs. So what we do is it's called place-based innovation. So when we created the Elemental Accelerator program 6 years ago, we started with a $30 million grant from the Navy, amazing Navy money. And we said, what does the Hawaii and Asia Pacific ecosystem need most? Where are the valleys of death? So where are startups that are trying to excel in Hawaii, which has the most expensive energy in the country, probably 4 times what you pay here in Colorado and across the national average. What do they need? Where are they failing? And so that's how we created our program. It's been very successful. We've funded 53 startups to date, and it's really broad. Anything in the energy sector, wind, solar, battery, grid services, grid stabilization, but also water, cybersecurity, food and ag, and mobility. So we have a really broad mandate. We take, think of the question at the back, a systems approach towards looking at the entire energy system and all the things that sort of touches it. Now we're joined with a new organization, which is part of the Emerson Collective. We're part of the Elemental program there, so we now have a California footprint. And now we're starting this process all over again. Place-based innovation, what does the California and US ecosystem need specifically? So in terms of an ask, I'd love to answer any questions now or later. And then if you know startups, we're always looking. And hit me up with any questions you have.
Ryan, what's one of the successes that the accelerators had?
That's a great question, Sandra. Thanks. I'd tell you an amazing success story. So we have a company called STEM, and they make batteries. Actually, they don't even make the batteries. They just buy the batteries and put them in big racks. They take those racks and put them in buildings. When energy is expensive, they put out energy. When energy is cheap, they charge, right? The very simple business model. When they joined our program, they had about 30 employees. They were growing and scaling. We helped fund a project with Hawaii Electric, and that has now gone on to be an 85 megawatt contract, the largest in the world, with Southern California Edison. And it is great for energy storage for those buildings in specific, but also we give the controls, or STEM gives the controls over to the utility. So when there are peaks in energy draw, then the utility itself can use that as energy output. So that is sort of the future of the grid, where it's both decentralized and controlled by sort of a larger entity, which is a utility in this case.
Yeah, peak load shifting is tremendous. Actually, in my last position at AutoGrid, we were building apps for utilities to shift peak load. And up to 40% of costs from your electrical bills are due to 5% of the hours of the year. And those hours are often fueled by dirty fossil fuel power plants, spot purchased on markets, and come from natural gas spinning reserves. So thank you, Ryan, for accelerating all these technologies. And
thank you. And I'll just say, let me just one more thing, because this really brings it home. So I was in Hawaii last week, and I was actually hanging out with Hank Rogers, who was here on Monday, and we were in his office, and he was like, Ryan, look out on the horizon there. See those like big-ass ships, and they're really low in the water? He's like, those are the boats that have diesel in them. That diesel comes to Hawaii and powers the grid, as it has been. $5 billion a year, and it used to be 100% that. And now we're moving to 100% renewable energy. We're at about 20-25% right now. That's it.
And there are countries across the world who are primarily using diesel as their sole source of energy supply, places where people don't have access to a stable electrical grid, places where the majority of the population has no access to electricity or running water. And that's what my company, 10 Power, is working to solve. We're going to do a quick crowd participation activity. Everybody put down what you're holding and do this with me. 10 Power. Ready?
Do it again.
10 Power. Yeah, if you forget the name, you can count your fingers. So 10 Power is working to bring renewable energy to the 1.2 billion people on the planet, 16% of humanity that doesn't have access to the electrical grid today. And we're taking a different approach than most energy access companies that you would think of. Because what we've seen with having massive success in the market, 60x growth, international securitized assets, are these small lanterns, lights, cell phone chargers. But think about it as a human. Think about it as yourself right now, and not a villager in Africa. At the end of the day, are you going to be happy with just a cell phone charger and a flashlight? Yes, it makes a world of difference when you're cooking with kerosene and suddenly your children can study at night. But in order for us to create global, regenerative, sustainable economic growth, people need a 24-hour, reliable, renewable grid. So 10 Power is working with commercial and industrial customers in the high social impact segment. We started in Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere and the 7th poorest country in the world, and is about a half-hour flight from Florida. And we're working in Haiti with commercial and industrial customers. We started with water purification centers, where we've provided the project development, and the finance for them to achieve reliable, renewable electricity. We're working with local installers, taking a humble learner approach and really learning from the community's needs, building capacity, helping them install up to international codes, and enabling training programs for women and men engineers coming out of school to get trained up in solar, to help them to become technicians and then installers and solar engineers. And we're hoping to create a portfolio of different technologies. So it's not just solar in the future. We're working with energy storage, and as Mario pointed out, the costs are dropping dramatically. We're at this wonderful time in history where PV is actually cost competitive, if not cost advantageous, with what diesel is costing for these customers. And take, for example, our operations manager, Angelique, at our customer Delohady that's distributing water to micro enterprises, the majority of which are female-led. She's spending over half of her revenues on electricity today. So every single dollar that we can save their organization goes back into providing clean water for the community, preventing cholera and dysentery, supporting families and communities. And as we grow our impact, the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Marie Curie or Albert Einstein could be a little girl who's sitting at the end of a dirt road in a mud shack and carries water on her head for 6 hours per day. And when we unleash her genius with access to renewable energy, with access to the internet, with access to world markets, we are unleashing a whole new frontier of potential for herself, her family, her community, and all of society. If we have one more minute, I'd like to share a little bit about my personal story, which has actually just manifested really recently for me. I'm half Korean, and I was visiting my dad in South Korea, and we were in the Korean History Museum, and he said, when I was a child, Korea was the second worst country on the planet. And he doesn't talk about this, but his little sister actually died because his mom didn't have enough milk to feed her. And within my father's lifetime, Korea has gone from the bottom of the stack to the absolute top of the stack in terms of shipbuilding ports, global brands, Samsung, it's a completely modernized city, it's exporting technology, and they're leading in terms of urban green space as one of the highest densified cities with one of the highest percentages of broadband penetration. And if that can happen within my father's lifetime, the same thing can happen for Haiti, the same thing can happen for non-OECD nations, which are going to increase the entire world's energy demands by 150%. By the year 2030, and it is our responsibility to make sure that that growth is powered by clean, renewable energy as opposed to dirty fossil fuels. Thank you. Take it away, Paul.
Okay. You know, it's a real pleasure to be here and hear the different stories that I think are very inspiring. And part of the battle, this is what I'm going to sort of start. If we can switch over to the iPad. Is getting people to realize that the imagination is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have. So as an artist and as a writer and as a musician, this is me DJing Earth Day a little while ago. We had one of the largest gatherings, almost 1 million people in front of the Washington Monument. So it was me, the Flaming Lips, the Roots, probably bands that don't come to Colorado that often, but you know, it's electronic music, hip hop, techno, dubstep, things like that. So when we all had a team meeting, we ended up doing a whole situation like, okay, we have these silos in different cultures. You have scientists, you have artists, you have creatives. And the eerie thing is that everyone wants a better world. If you sat even a Republican down and said, look, do you want death, doom, and destruction? Well, maybe Trump. You'll.
The Koch brothers.
Yeah, and so when I hear everyone talking about systems thinking, half of the tools that the progressive community doesn't use is the culture. So to me, at least, one of the fun parts about being here is I've gotten a chance to catch up with folks, and I want to show you guys a couple of quick things. So me and Michael Brune, who's going to be speaking later, went to the Arctic Circle a little while ago, and we had a series of artist discussions while we were there. And that's Rue Mapp, who does a really great outreach out of Oakland, bringing young kids of color to remote places, because a lot of urban kids don't leave the city. And so we ended up having a series of debates and discussions near the Arctic Circle. That's one project, but I also worked pretty extensively with National Geographic. And one of my recent projects is based on Alan Turing, who generally is considered to be the father of computing. Now, I'm going to tie this together with a couple of projects that I think are resonant with what is going on here. So Turing in the 50s came with a term what he called morphogenesis. And basically, he was looking at patterns in the same way that Buckminster Fuller was, but because he thought that the universe itself became algorithmic, and actually that he had the theory of a hologramic vision of the universe, he'd gone from starting computers to the edge of the universe, literally. It's a great essay called Morphogenesis. So I took his equations and I'm artist in residence at Stanford, and we did this at what you call data visualization project based on Turing's equations. And one of his equations basically looks at how large-scale systems kind of can be digitized. So say, for example, this is the Milky Way. And the eerie thing about morphogenesis is it takes you from the micro to the macro. And as scientists, anyone who's a scientist in the room can easily see that this is a very specific morphology at work. Now let's dial it into Earth. This is a storm off the coast of Florida. You can see the same morphology at work, right? You see the pattern. Now let's dial it even further to a human, and you can even see the same kind of pattern at work. So when we start thinking about the human place in the universe and the way that culture and the arts function, there's a very famous phrase, which it's probably been belatedly beaten over everyone's head. The Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone. It ended because people changed their tools. And so the eerie thing about 21st century is we're bombarded with both negative issues of climate change and things like that, but human beings are problem solvers. So where does the arts fit into that? Recently, I just want to ask a quick question. This is on purpose, by the way. I love the idea of a nonlinear discussion. How many of you have a cell phone? Probably, okay, it's about 100%. And then of that 100%, how many of you have iOS, like Apple phone? Probably, I bet you 80, maybe 90. How many have Android? Okay, that's the geeks, okay. And then of that demographic, so we all have a network in place here and right now. So recently, I hosted the March for Science in DC, the after party, because we had a series of debates and discussions between scientists and artists. And it was a really powerful moment because it was the world's largest gathering of scientists in human history. And it was really amazing to see how many people gathered to really push this notion that the debate and the discussion had to be a conversation between scientists and everyone. It was an incredible gathering. It was really heartwarming to see. And on top of that, we made it a point that we wanted to have as diverse as possible a leadership team. And this is the crew. And what ended up happening, Ayanna Johnson, she's the woman with the afro. They organized it, and there were a group of young scientists who really felt it was incredibly critical to reach an kind of outgrowth of how science can inform policy and the arts. So what I'm going to do now is, I've already asked everyone how many of you have a phone. I think 90% of you have a phone that was sort of produced by Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs is an intriguing character because he was a synthesist. He was someone who pulled together quite a few different teams and was able to produce, literally world-changing machinery and devices. So in the summer of 1967, he was about 13, and he was listening to this group, the Beatles. So he named Apple after their record label, Apple Records. So tonight I'm going to be remixing the Beatles because this is the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, 1967-2017. So the Beatles commissioned me to remix them, and we had a concert at Liverpool recently where they're from. Now the Beatles are God in England. It was incredible. We had about 20,000 people come to the festival, and it was throughout Liverpool. And actually Strawberry Fields is a real place where John Lennon wrote. So we're calling this project the Remixed Repackaged Situation. And it was really incredible to see this album cover because it was a collaborative race between their influences on their style. Now, how many of you guys like the Beatles? I'm just curious, like audience-wise. Okay, thanks. I was more of a Hendrix guy, before they got in touch, and now I'm a converted Beatles fan. So what I want to do, just because time is tight here, I'm going to just show you a quick remix and then give you a sense of, this is an app I developed, and it basically lets you take anything from SoundCloud, Google Music, Spotify, iTunes, and so on. So say, for example, I want to call up the Beatles, because that's what we've been talking about. Call up, let's say, Hello, Hello. I'm just going to do a live remix for you, just to give you a sense. Hopefully the sound is up, if we got that.
You say yes, I say no. You say stop, and I say go, go, go. That's right.
This is a journey into sound.
All right, so it's probably rare that your audience would get Eric B. and Rakim remixed with the Beatles, but hey, why not? So the idea is you have a democratization of tools, and if you have many people having access to comparative frames of reference, the data that we all use to derive our contemporary culture, we are in a data-driven society. So that data can actually be used in the arts. So what I'm going to do is just wrap up, but the idea here is how do we think about these tools as leverage for cultural capital? And when we're looking at Buckminster Fuller and when we're looking at other people who are systems thinking, you have to include the arts because that's where cultural capital really changes society. So the same summer that was going on, this was going on. And it was a really powerful moment in American history. You had many American cities on fire. There were riots throughout the country. And people tried to levitate the Pentagon. It's a very famous image, and at that time, it was a critical moment of debate and discussion in the culture. And there was the Summer of Love, and people, imagine putting, if I, as an African American, walked up to a cop with a flower now, I'm sure you guys would be reading DJ Spooky murdered, by the way, cops. But, basically this idea of that time leveraged an entire cultural change. And that's something that's really important. I have films, I have other stuff, but we're on a little bit of a tight schedule. But I just want to leave you with this image and think about a 2017 change of culture. What does that do? What is the potential of our society to really re-envision and reframe the idea of transformation? And that's what, it's been a real pleasure here, everyone speaking. And I have other friends here as well, like Jeffrey Sachs, who is a wonderful thinker. And it's been a real pleasure. So should we open up to questions? I don't know what the next thing is. But
Thank you, Spooky.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we can say we greatly appreciate your work in the world. As we're moving into the era of big data, it's going to be the artists, the statisticians, the data scientists who really tell the stories and help us understand our universe, push frontiers into our comprehension of both our external factors, input and output analysis on systems, as well as our internal biome and quantified self. And it's going to be the collaboratives and the creatives who lead the way in that. But this new era of understanding requires the collaboration of every single type of artist, activist, business person, philanthropist, scientist. And we're going to take 2 minutes to do a really quick 5-breath meditation. Then we'll throw some popcorn out in terms of what you visualized, and then we'll formulate a discussion from there. And this discussion is a framework for everyone in the room to participate, so pop in with questions. So if everyone can just get really grounded, sink your feet into the floor, feel your body exactly where you are. You're welcome to close your eyes. Wherever you are in your breath, just exhale. And as you inhale, feel your roots drawing up power from the earth. Feel your belly, your lungs, drawing up all that amazing power from the earth creator. At the top of your breath, I want you just to hold that potential and then release it with your exhale. On your next inhale, you're going to draw in the power of your ancestors, your DNA, everyone who came before you, who brought you to where you are. Holding all that potential for evolution and releasing it with the exhale. In your next inhale, you're going to draw in your own power, your trajectory, what brought you here today, your work professionally, personally, giving gratitude for all of the connections that you have in your life, your family, the people around you right here, right now. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Sally. And exhaling the potential of your own trajectory, this amazing network, all these people together. On this inhale, you're going to draw in your personal mission, your purpose, your talents, your skills, and the vision for what you're trying to create in the world. Holding that at the top of your breath. And releasing that potential out into the universe. You're just going to take one more breath on your own time, thinking about what it is that you're bringing and what it is that you're trying to create. and releasing that with an exhale. Thank you. If anyone would like to share what that vision is of the future that you personally are trying to create and what skills that you're bringing to the table through your life work, please. And feel free just to shout out.
My name's Andrew, and I wrote a book called The Trust Frequency, and Sally wrote the foreword for that book, and it's probably the best statement on the confluence of consciousness or spirituality and climate change. It's very brief. I recommend it. It's in the bookstore there. For the first time, I just heard mention of the summer of love. I'm 73 years old, so I'm probably older than you guys by a little. I'm just, whew, I've spent all day close to breaking down. This is the serious breakdown. If I break down and become completely, well, so be it. I would like to introduce myself to the four of you because I'd like to be in touch with all of you for at least 4 different reasons, if not 44 different reasons. Because I've been working on this stuff for a long, long, long time. I formed a nonprofit organization in 1971 in California to do this work, okay? Didn't happen big time, big education for me. I'm making a film called 60/60, and the reason it's called 60/60 is the 60s are about to turn 60 in the year 2020. And I'd love you guys to be in that film because the film is for you. What I tried to do both in the book and in this film is to distill what my generation learned. And I think my generation is not exactly, yesterday is the summer solstice of 2017. June of 1967 was the famous summer of love. I have heard nothing, zero, from my generation about that to me, very important fact. Why? We rose up, we believed in something, we took to the streets, we faced the guns, we put flowers into the muzzles of those guns, we actually successfully levitated the Pentagon. Still up there somewhere. And I just want to say, you guys are so fucking beautiful. Thank you. Please, if you can, let me have your email or some contact.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's definitely follow up.
I just want to say one more thing. I have this link to this 60/60 little trailer that I'd love to get to you guys, and it's so hard to get everybody afterwards because I've nailed here. I have to be photographing everybody. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
This is a question for Paul. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think with arts education, you find, at least in my experience in working with and knowing artists, it's hard for a lot of artists to understand their work as having a sort of social purpose. There's sort of the self-indulgent tendency maybe for some artists to make it all about, I have to express myself and so be it, whatever comes out. And that's a good impulse because that can create a lot of great work. But in this day and age, I think we don't really have time to pursue sort of self-indulgent expression without thinking perhaps there's some tie-in or some purpose for some greater good. And I wonder, based on your work, where's perhaps the K-12 shift on this? How do we get into the minds of arts curriculum designers and developers, so our kids who are going and doing self-portraits in 4th grade understand that there's a greater purpose other than just teaching them how to use charcoals and brushes, for example?
That's a great question, and thank you for that. I mean, the eerie thing about 21st century culture is that we have access to so much information, and the comparative frame of reference with education and access. The gentleman yesterday was talking about the idea of a civic society, that you need to have reasonable education just to have a functioning nation state as a democracy. And of course, we now are seeing the rise of fake news and all this stuff where people are being bombarded with radically unreal things, and how do we fight that? I'm a big fan of what you call STEAM, the whole movement of trying to figure out ways to combine education with practice. And I think the American educational model was very functional for a long time, but in the last decade or so, I go to China, I go to Korea, I go to Germany all the time. Korea recovered from colonialism, devastation, war, and yeah, it's a great example. And America, if we don't play our cards right, I mean, these are a really critical moment. But I also just am inspired. One phrase I'd love to leave everyone with is that I'd love to say that the imagination is the ultimate renewable resource. And we have to really think about using that to create new paths, because I think the path we're on is you know, literally the cliche is unsustainable. But it's a critical moment in this summer. Like, there's record level temperatures. You can't even fly a plane to certain parts of the US now because the heat. They even had new colors on the maps for heat wave. Because they can't, even orange, red doesn't convey how hot it is. But if you sit across from Trump or some of these people, you know, how do you even convey the idea of a future? I don't think these people believe in a future. They're just, you know, kind of like finance and now, that's it. So sorry to sound a down note there, but I do think that people like Louis' film, Racing Extinction, is a really powerful climate reality that was Al Gore is doing. But it has to be from kids too, and so maybe that's a new voice.
Hi. So you asked about a vision. So Buckminster Fuller asked us the question, right? How do we make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without any ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone? So I've been living that for nearly 40 years, you know, and really asking entrepreneurs, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, how to monetize their products and services to do that. So I just want to share with you, I have that on a card, anybody that wants that, or you can go to my Facebook and download it. But I thank you so much, because for those of us over 60 in this room, we get all excited about you. And I'd like to offer to you to come to my little booth. I want to video you for like a minute or two and open my network, my huge network in Asia Pacific, to support all of your endeavors and anyone here, especially the younger, but anyone really, because that is what we are about, spontaneous cooperation. And I'd like to really thank Chip and Sally, because this is exactly what it is. I love it here. I get so moved. And I just put the word out through social media, let everyone know we can all watch these videos. I have people watch the videos through the year in AREDAY, because this is the best information. Thank you.
And thank you for your work. And
we'll just do one last question, because we've got 20 seconds left here.
I'm Julie Wrigley. I don't know if it's on or not. It is now.
Yeah.
Thank you. You give us hope. These 4 days, 3.5, have given us great hope. And we need to take this show on the road, young and old. The messages are all here. Let's get you all out, and many of the speakers, so we can multiply it. But congratulations to each of you. Even when we go through some dark moments, out of it comes such brightness, like the 4 of you and the many people here. Thank you.
Final thoughts? Okay, so we're just going to each share a couple final thoughts and look forward to continuing this discussion later today off the stage. So my final thought is I've been thinking a lot about conviction and just how important that is recently. So 9 out of 10 New Year's resolutions and 9 out of 10 businesses fail. And why? It's because people don't really believe that they can do it. And my favorite quote of Fuller's of the day today is, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So let's do this.
we are at a truly transformative point in history. The price for renewables has dropped to the point where we have a massive investment opportunity that, like the railroad, is going to open up completely new frontiers for humanity and also produce some ridiculously wealthy people. Even inflation adjusted, some of the richest people in history on the planet got rich because of the railroad. But unlike the railroad, the renewable energy revolution is not going to be built on the backs of human exploitation and environmental degradation. So I invite you to join 10 Power. We're working on a fund right now for Haiti, and this is just our pilot for expanding into sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. So let's do this together.
10 Power.
You know, as I hear the fellows, my panelists here, the problem right now is I think we need to have a revolution of the mind. And the problem with these times that we live in is that people don't have access to, I think, valid, authentic experience and putting themselves in somebody else's shoes. If you're a cop sitting across from a black person, how do you feel? If you're an environmental activist sitting across from a Republican senator, how do they feel? And that sense of an emotional logic actually will inform anything much more than the cold data. You can present numbers till you're blue in the face, and those numbers will not be part of the dialogue. But if you can convince and work with people emotionally and psychologically and all these different ways that I think are powerful tools that the arts can bring to bear, that's the revolution. And I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here. And hey, thanks.
I'll say, what are we waiting for? If we don't act now, there will be no future. If whatever you're doing, double it. If you give money every year, double that money. Give it to these ladies. If you invest in clean energy, double it. If you reach out to a lot of friends, double that outreach and double that again to people on the other side. This is the moment, and we should all feel the gravity of that and feel inspiration from it. Should we go bam?
Yeah, let's go bam.
Okay, so we're
easy, you'll get it.
do it.
It starts like this. Bam!